Regional mayors are calling for an interline agreement with Air New Zealand to force the airline to promote regions it doesn't directly fly to. This comes, of course, after Regional Economic Development Minister Shane Jones called out Air New Zealand this week for axing regional routes, most recently its Auckland to Kapiti service. Mayors in areas where New Zealand now doesn't land say it's a double whammy. Not only do they not get the national airline, bringing them tourists, business people and other visitors with money to spend, they don't get the benefit of the national airline's promotional push, like having their towns and cities endorsed and promoted in the Air New Zealand Kia Ora magazine. The mayors have told Checkpoint Air New Zealand could help, even if they don't land. First, they could promote their New Zealand towns, as well as the ones the airline does visit. Secondly, they could load their destinations onto the Air New Zealand website, working alongside the smaller carriers. And finally, they could check luggage all the way through, working with the smaller airlines to make sure bags get all the way from Wellington to Whakatane, for example, rather than being offloaded in Auckland. Bridget Burke travels to the places Air New Zealand won't.
Whakatane Mayor Tony Bond says it's time for Air New Zealand to step up as a national airline that acknowledges the provinces, even the towns and cities it doesn't fly to.
Currently we are silent. If you look at an Air New Zealand book, Whakatane doesn't exist. They don't market Whakatane anymore.
He blames current Chief Executive Christopher Luxon for a change of direction, which, since his appointment in 2013, has seen the airline axe services to Hamilton, Wanaka, Westport, Taupo, Whakatane, Wanganui and Kaitaia.
When the board decided to phase out all the small aircraft and only have large ones, they never gave the opportunity to even try in Whakatane. They just pulled the plug.
Mr Bond says since Air Chatham's took over the service 3 years ago, flights have fallen from around $1,000 return via Auckland to Wellington to around $600. But he says the Whakatane region gets no marketing from Air New Zealand, and he's written to the Transport Minister Phil Twyford today urging him to push Air New Zealand for an interline agreement.
Now, I think that what he needs to do with Chris is talk to him about how Air New Zealand's marketing themselves as a national airline. If they want to retain that national airline status, why don't they embrace the feeder airlines which have come in since they've pulled out and actually are feeding their main trunk lines?
Air New Zealand cancelled services to Westport in 2015. Sounds Air took over with regular flights to Wellington, but Bulla District Mayor Gary Howard says Air New Zealand's decision still hurts.
We've got a wonderful service from Sounds Air with 26 flights per week, but it's actually having the provincial link that can go right through, so you're not having to check off one particular flight service and then check into another flight service. And I'm really perplexed about why Air New Zealand does not allow such a system to actually come into place.
Both mayors, Howard and Bond, say an interline agreement, which embraces all airports regardless of size, is vital to support regional growth.
The interline agreement means where somebody can go seamless from Whakatane through to Wellington. Our bags are booked in Whakatane and we'll just end up in Wellington. So that's where we need Air New Zealand to actually come to, is accept the fact that they don't want to come into some provincial airports, but please, why don't they work in with these feeder airlines? The other thing that frustrates business travellers that go from Whakatane, I know going down to Wellington's no problem because in between you can go into the Coro Lounge, but on the way home, no, you're not allowed to go into the Coro Lounge because you're flying with a feeder airline. So that's a little thing that is not that important, but it is important to those business travellers.
Air New Zealand announced earlier this month that service between the Kapiti coast and Auckland is the latest to face the axe. Mayor Kay Gurunathan says Air New Zealand has an obligation to ensure another airline, most likely Air Chatham's, takes over the service.
I think even if they don't have a commercial responsibility to ensure the viability of our economies and our social links to the main centres, they have a moral responsibility.
Mr Gurunathan says Kapiti Coast residents were shocked the decision came just days after more than 1,000 people turned out to an airport open day.
They are gutted, which means they've got to go all the way to Wellington, and Wellington traffic down there is a nightmare. Or they have to go up to Palmerston North, and the coroner recently on the road links from here, the new road links that have been proposed from here to Palmerston North side, that's been called the killing fields.
Transport Minister Phil Twyford said he can't force Air New Zealand to fly into regions that aren't commercially viable.
By the same token, we are the major shareholder, and I think it's only right that Air New Zealand should listen to and take into account the government's views. So that's why I'll be sitting down with Christopher Luxon and having that conversation. I'm sure after the events of the last week that Mr Luxon's under no illusion about our government's commitment to regional economic development and our concern about the loss of air services. But I want to know, moving forward, what Air New Zealand's plans are for the regions.
Sounds Air, Great Barrier Airlines and Air Chatham's have taken over the routes abandoned by Air New Zealand. Air Chatham's General Manager Dwayne Emeny says the airline has held previous discussions with Air New Zealand about interlining and allowing tourists to book flights through the Air New Zealand website through to provincial airports.
They did give us reasons for why that would be difficult, especially with Whakatane. Our reservation system simply wasn't capable.
Mr Emeny says he's hopeful Air Chatham's can take over the Kapiti to Auckland service.
So right now we're just in the last stages of due diligence around the performance, so takeoff and landing performance at that airport. We've got a third-party performance company working through the data that's been supplied to us by the airport company. I've been very forthcoming with that. And hopefully by early next week we'll have the information we need to be able to make a call on whether it's a route that we can service adequately.
Buller District Mayor Gary Howard says Shane Jones has shown Air New Zealand has become a volume carrier with a disregard for the regions.
Air New Zealand has lost its provincial respect when it actually withdrew its services, and it's no longer what I would regard as a national carrier. They have made a strategic change, and I do think that they will actually regret that severing themselves from community links and services, which was a strategic advantage, and no longer. And I think they've lost their identity as New Zealand's national carrier.
For Checkpoint, Bridget Burke.
We saw comment from Air New Zealand about whether they would welcome an interline agreement and some of the other issues raised in that story. We have received no response from them.